Today I'm driving my 1999 Toyota MR2. This has been my daily driver for the past 3-4 years. It's my first proper car that's mine, and as you can see, we've got 168,598 miles on the clock, so it's seen a few things in its time. Today I'm going to take it out on a drive. It's a little bit wet today, so won't be pushing it too hard. But yeah, so first things first, I'll show you a little bit around the car. So this is a revision 5 model from 1999. So we've got uprated suspension on the front and rear to try and reduce snap oversteer, and then we've got a different design on the rear subframe as well. It's a 2-litre 3SGE engine, producing, when it was new, 168 horsepower. Not quite sure we've got all of those here anymore, but she still goes. Not quite as quick as some of the hot hatches that go today, but because we got a bit of rain, we're going to put the pop-ups on. Right, we're going to try and find some fun roads. So, as I mentioned, I've had this car since I was 19, nearly 20, just before the coronavirus sort of happened. I bought this while I was at university. Goes. Right, we're going to try and avoid going down there. There seems to be a bit of traffic. I've already let it warm up a little bit, so we're alright to give a little bit of acceleration. In North America they stopped making this car in 1995, but in the UK and Europe, I believe, they continued until, I think the last orders were early to mid 2000s. So the difference between this and a Japanese one is we haven't got a Beams engine in the back. We've still got a generation 3, I believe, 3SGE, so not quite as much power and no VVTi. So having 168,000 miles on the clock, you'd expect a fair few things to have gone wrong, and I think the main thing that's gone wrong in that time is probably rust. We've had both of the sills, inner and outer, replaced. It seems to be going a little bit on the arches at the moment, so I'm going to have to get that sorted at some point as well. Most of the electrical stuff to do with the engine, the ignition coils, the igniter, stuff like that, that's all been replaced. Suspension, brakes, tyres, all the standard stuff, all been replaced multiple times, even in my ownership. I picked her up at about 145,000, so just over 20,000 miles in that time. I'm going to try and get on some faster roads in a minute. Most of this car is standard. I didn't fancy trying to do a sort of max power build with this. It's really difficult to modify some of these cars at all without looking like something out of Fast and Furious. So tried to do a little bit of what seems to be popular at the moment is OEM Plus. So we've got the steering wheel from a Japanese revision 5, an aftermarket shifter surround here, completely refurbished the shifter and the bushings underneath the car. We've got an aftermarket head unit, Android Auto, etc. Only thing needed at the moment is some new speakers, not because I want loud sounds, just because they're all blown. This doesn't have any sort of premium sound system or anything like that, so it is really quite a basic sound system. rain seems to be letting up a little bit at the moment. So common mods that people do tend to do to these cars, the wheels and tyres seem to be the main ones. So this has got the standard revision 5 wheels on, so that means 15 inches, 205/55 I believe at the front, and 225/50 at the back. There's only one tyre reasonably priced that they make, and that's some Toyo Proxys TR1s. Standard people tend to go to 17 inches. Any bigger than that and you're kind of just rubbing, or it just looks a bit ridiculous at that point. And that kind of livens the feel up a little bit. It's a little bit like squidgy. You can see there's quite a lot of, not a lot of feel in the front. But the trade-off is at the moment suspension. Well, I should say the ride comfort is actually quite good in this car at the moment, even with the standard suspension. In the future I might look into coilovers potentially, but I like the idea of keeping this thing just a road car that I use every day, even in the winter. I've undersealed it completely with a product called LanoGuard, and it seems to be holding up quite well to most of the stuff that hasn't already rusted through. But I think the main thing I like about this car is it's taught me a lot. So when I went to pick this car up, I didn't know much about cars. I mean, I loved them, but I really didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what to look out for on these, what could go wrong. So really, it's been more of a learning exercise than anything, and let me tell you, working on a mid-engine car is not fun. So many things that are simple jobs in other cars are just so difficult to get to. I mean, I think next weekend I'm going to attempt to change the alternator belt, because I don't think that's been done since God knows when. No service history with this car at all. And wheel off, you've got to get your hand right up in there, and there's a couple of YouTube tutorials. The forums are quite good for this, but it's really, everything on this car is just extra. It's so much more difficult than any other car, and it's a standard engine. They've used this in Corollas in other countries, things like that, but it's just the placement of it makes everything such a pain to get to. Parts of these are, I mean, back in the UK, probably 10 years ago, you could pick up an MR2 for 500 quid, so parts are plenty. People used to just thrash them about, and then when they started to rust, they would just break them, scrap them, just. But more recently, I would say they're starting to get a bit more scarce with certain parts. So I'm missing 200 trays at the moment. I do need to get that sorted, but 200 trays for this is going to set me back 60, 90 pounds, depending on who I buy it from. And unless I can find a pretty good breaker, chances are they're almost all damaged. They're going to need some sort of plastic welding doing. So it's not really ideal in that scenario. The aftermarket support for these is alright, not quite as good as what people consider the alternative, the NA or NB Mazda MX-5, or Miata if you're an American. And I would say the same about the running costs. They are probably similar, if not a bit more. I mean, a timing chain, or timing belt, sorry, on this is going to set you back £400 or £500 at one of the specialists. And I would say to anyone who is looking into an MR2, absolutely get everything done at a specialist. I made the mistake of not doing that, and nice people, but their garage did not know what they were doing, and I think it's cost me more in sort of having to have things done properly again than it was worthwhile. I may as well just pay the premium in the first place. But the prices on these tend to have risen since I bought it. I bought this in 2019, as I said, for £2,700. And a decent one of these, probably with a bit less miles, they seem to be selling for 4 or 5 grand now. A turbo one is going to set you back 12, 13, even more for really pristine examples. And that's insane. I mean, it's not had quite the same effect as a Supra or a sleeker GT4. They seem to have increased quite a bit more desirable cars. This is, at the moment, seems to be quite underrated. So I think I chose a pretty good time to get into one. A little bit of a puddle here. But overall, I mean, I drive this thing every day to work. Like 60-mile round trip. And you know, the noise insulation, I don't know if it comes across through the camera, but it's not great. I can do high miles. I've driven this thing all the way to sort of the north of Scotland before, in one trip, 12 hours, and it's doable. You know, the sound quality is, you know, you have to turn the sound system right up, and you're kind of drowning out any noise from the road by doing so, but it does get a little bit achy, the headache. I've actually replaced both the seats in this car. They were torn and sort of damaged. And interestingly, the rear mounts for these match up perfectly with the rear mounts on the GT86. The front mounts take a little bit of cutting and welding and bodging together, so I've kind of mishmashed my old seats that were a bit damaged and these to make GT86 seats work in my MR2. Now, in theory, if I could get the switches from a GT86 and put them somewhere, I could actually wire in the heated seats, and that would be perfect. That'd be lovely. But I haven't had the time to do that yet. Some other things actually I've done. I don't know if you can see down there. I've got power folding mirrors from a Japanese car that I've got to work, and they're a little bit temperamental. They're fused into the cigarette lighter, which is probably not right. Let's go back here. It's a little bit more empty on the way back. As soon as we get back into that 50. But yeah, they seem to blow a fuse occasionally, which isn't exactly what I want. But I've got a couple of spare fuses to go, and at some point I'll do that again probably. I mean, at the time I was a bit rushed. Seems to be the main problem with having a car like this every day. It isn't the fact it's old or the fact that it's less unreliable, because it isn't really. It's the fact that if you want to do anything major to this, you need it off the road for a couple of days, or you need to prepare for the unexpected, and I can't have this off the road for a couple of days. I need it. So even if something catastrophic went wrong, I think I could probably, even with my limited expertise, I mean, I'm not a mechanic in any way, but I still think I could probably, hold on, let's just, even with my limited expertise, I still think I could probably handle most things in this car, but I can't handle it being off the road. So something to look into is maybe if you have a second car, this would be perfect. But at the moment with this, it's not really ideal, and the nearest MR2 specialist is just on the other side of the country pretty much, so it's not really what I want. Now, being in the UK, being the other side of the country is probably like an hour away for me, so it's not exactly the worst. But where I live, there's not really any transport links around, so unless I ask someone for a lift back, which I don't really want to do, then yeah, this car is a little bit annoying on a daily basis. And a couple of issues I would say of having an NA versus the turbo is there's not much torque. Most of the torque of this engine is above, in the rev range, above 4,500, I think is peak torque in this. So if I put my foot down now, it takes a while to get going. There's not really much in the way of pull. Modern turbo cars, I mean, I've driven a modern 2 Series, I think it had about 100 miles on it as a loaner car at one point, and the power in that was much less than this. It was only 115, I think. It was a 3-cylinder turbo, but the torque was instant. And the 8-speed auto, or 7-speed auto, I can't remember which, was amazing. It was just instantaneous, which from this is the complete opposite. I mean, it's naturally aspirated, of course, which is great, but on a day-to-day basis, you really do want a turbo car for a lot of things. But the noise from this the noise from this 4-cylinder is actually quite nice. I mean, it's the standard exhaust. I haven't got anything fancy on there. I don't know if I'm keeping this engine forever. As I said, 170,000 miles on it. Who knows how long it's going to last before the next thing goes wrong. But you know, it's a good engine for a first car, I would say. This isn't the first car I learned to drive in, but it's my first car. And the only issue with night driving as well, cars nowadays seem to be level with you with their headlights. So every single person that goes by with LED or any sort of headlights made in the last 20 years, you're blind. And I think another issue that I think has just been demonstrated there, every time a truck goes past in the wet, I'm at the perfect height to be completely splashed with water. I think we're about to get it again with another car. If I just see here. Oh no, not quite as much. Okay, so just trucks really seem to be the issue. But forgetting all that, the acceleration isn't what this car was built for. It's cornering. So this thing, I don't really want to push it in the wet. A mid-engine car like this, famous for snap oversteer, maybe a little bit too famous. I just don't really want to push my luck. But this thing really does handle very well, if not a little bit too understeery. So try that here. Yeah, a little bit of understeer towards the exit there. I've never actually been able to get this to oversteer. There's no limited slip differential, it's an open diff. Only the turbo and late Japanese cars seem to have limited slip diffs from the factory. But it's still something you can put in at a later date. I mean, people tend to swap the turbo gearboxes into these. But yeah, I mean, the interior quality is quite good as well on this. For a car of its age, I mean, there's no cracks in the dashboard, there's no air conditioning. I do wish we had that, but something we don't seem to have much of in this era in the UK. Of course, it wasn't as hot in the summer, so. But yeah, overall, I'm extremely happy driving this every day, because that noise. I think more than anything, just the way this thing looks. I mean, nothing else quite on the road, unless you find an NSX or an RX-7, quite has the stance and the way this thing looks, the wedge-shaped front. Anyways, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe and all those normal things that every YouTuber tells you to do. But yeah, as always, take care.